everyone. How are you? Doing good? Well, today I have chosen a story. Its name is The Miracle of the Oceanose. Oceanose. It's a name of a ship liner, right? And I picked it up from this book, Disaster and Survival. This story, The Miracle of the Oceanose, has been written by Jack Monroe. So let's get started. May I have my sip of water? Then I'm good to go. Okay. So the miracle of the Oceanose, there is an enduring seafaring custom known as the Birkenhead drill. Women and children first, in honor of the British troop carrier HMS Birkenhead, which hit a reef in 1852. So this is where we get the name Birkenhead drill, because of this British troop carrier which hit a reef in 1852. Fearing that the lifeboats carrying women and children would be swamped, the commanding officer asked his men to stand fast. Not a man moved. 445 of them went down with the ship. They could have saved their lives, but no, they stood fast and drowned, and they knew they were going to die. But on the evening of Saturday, August the 3rd, 1991, when the passenger liner Oceanose set sail on her fateful voyage from the Buffalo River harbor in South Africa, not one of the ship's senior officers was to honor the Birkenhead drill. The Oceanose was a giant of a ship, 150 meters long, 6 decks tall, weighing 12,000 tons. Imagine how much would that be? She was 39 years old, no longer in the prime of her life, but she was luxuriously appointed and carried the highest possible safety rating from Lloyd's Register of Shipping. So it was a very sophisticated, very luxurious and well-studded ship liner. There were 571 people on board when Oceanose nosed her way out of the harbor entrance to head north towards Durban, some 435 kilometers up the treacherous east coast of Africa. There were 361 passengers and 184 crew members, 6 administrators, and finally 20 ship's entertainers employed to organize the social whirl which passengers expected on their fair weather holiday cruises. The passengers are on holiday, cruise director Lorraine Betts told her team of administrators and entertainers. You are here to work. The group smiled back at her grimly. They had entertained a large wedding party in harbour the previous day and had only managed to catnap during the past 48 hours. Now, without pause, the revelry was due to start all over again. Oopsie daisy. It was 8 p.m. that night when Oceanose began to pitch and roll. The huge waves whipped up by a 40-knot wind below decks. Passengers playing slot machines in the ship's casino were thrown across the room as the deck slipped away from under their feet. From the next door lounge, there was a cry of "Watch out!" as a grand piano crashed from the stage. "I think we are in for a rough time," one passenger remembers saying to his wife. A ship's musician, Tracy Hill, was dozing fitfully in her cabin, catching up on lost sleep. Suddenly, an ear-splitting crash woke her. Heavy cabin trunks had been tossed across the room and smashed against the wall. There was a dense curtain of white foam boiling at the closed porthole. Suddenly, water spurted through the seal, soaking everything in the cabin. Oh my God, it was getting dangerous, water coming inside. Outside the door, her husband Moss was about to put his key in the lock when three agitated ship security officers staggered past him along the passageway. They were staggering because the Oceanus was pitching and rolling. Curious, he followed. Outside a door marked generator room, oil-smeared crew members were dripping water all over the floor, yelling at each other at the tops of their voices. Then the entire ship was plunged into total darkness as a dull explosion sent a tremor through the vessel. The Oceanus lay dead in the water, rolling and slewing sideways in the enormous swells. The emergency generator cut in, throwing eerie half-light shadows everywhere. Thank you. The deck officers were huddled on the bridge, white-faced. Captain Giannis Evrenas, still dressed in his tropical whites, looked stunned. Haggard, no longer the cool and dashing figure he had cut earlier in the day. His officers were staring at him in nervous silence. They were to obey orders. See the discipline? The staff captain was shouting over and over again into the radio, "Mayday, Mayday, Mayday, Mayday." The door to the bridge burst open, bringing with it the howling sounds of a raging gale. The chief engineer staggered in, stuttering with shock and fear, already wearing a life jacket and clutching a duffel bag to his chest. "Hull plates have fractured on the starboard side," he stammered breathlessly. "The watertight doors won't stop the flooding." "Oh my God," muttered Avranus. In stunned silence, he struggled to come to terms with the fact that there was nothing to stop the sea pouring through the web of drainage pipes, surging from outlets all over the ship, gradually flooding the vessel, deck by deck. In no time at all, the build-up of water in the bows would drag her down, and imagine it was 6 decks high. "How fast is the water coming in?" he barked. "We only have a few hours." The chief engineer swung on his heels and raced off the bridge. Imagine what's going on inside their minds, but they're not showing it. "The crew knows we are sinking," reported a breathless deck officer. "They're abandoning the ship." Bewildered, Avranas looked around him. Officers who had been standing on the bridge only minutes before had already slipped away. The captain shrugged and hurried to his cabin. "Get dressed," he told his wife and their 4-year-old daughter. "We are in trouble." One of the ship's magicians, Robert Bowman, was on the way to the main lounge. Okay, so see, this is what's happening at the ship. Okay. One of the ship magicians, it was an entertaining voyage. It was a holiday cruise. One of the ship's magicians, Robin Boltman, was on his way to the main lounge when members of the crew rushed past him. He tumbled after them up on the lifeboat deck, and his jaw dropped at what he saw. A jostling, screaming crowd of fully dressed officers and crew were piling into a lifeboat, just like I showed you in the picture. And you're supposed to do your duty and save the lives of your passengers. Back in the lounge, he relayed the news to Lorraine Betts. "Let them go, we don't need scared people around," she declared. Then she hurried off to confront the captain. "What's happening?" she demanded. Evrenos would not meet her eyes. "How serious is the situation, Captain?" she asked firmly. "Everyone must gather in the main lounge. Tell your staff to fetch life jackets from below," he answered. Lorraine hurried below. Can he handle this situation? She wondered. He already seems a bundle of nerves. Don't they say he's buckling under the strain? She mustered her staff. Singers, dancers, musicians, cabaret artists and hostesses. "Quiet," she ordered the chattering nervous group. "The captain says we have engine trouble. There's been some flooding below. Nothing serious. Go to each cabin and tell everyone to assemble for lifeboat drill in the main lounge. No passengers are allowed back below. Bring all the life jackets and blankets you can find. No questions," she declared as a babble of voices broke out around her. "Just do as I say." Soon, hundreds of passengers, many in jeans and t-shirts, others in suits and cocktail dresses, a handful dressed only in flimsy night clothes, were sitting in the gloomy lounge. Robin Boltman, the magician, was climbing onto the stage. "Sorry about the light, folks. We forgot to pay the bill," he joked. "May I have your attention, please?" See what he does best. He tried to help out. What a presence of mind. The passengers stirred. John and Gail Adamson, who had taken the trip to celebrate their 11th wedding anniversary, squatted on the floor, trying on their children's life jackets with trembling fingers. Only 17 days before, Gail had given birth to a son. The baby, together with his two sisters, aged 8 and 2, were on board with them. John looked at his wife. "Whatever's gone wrong, it can't be all that bad," he told himself. "Passenger liners don't sink, not in this day and age." He's trying to console himself. A hostess leaned over John's shoulder. "Take your wife and children into the foyer," she suggested quietly. Gail swaddled a blanket around baby John and clutched him against her life jacket. John swept pajama-clad Carrie into the air and struggled out of the lounge with 8-year-old Samantha's arms wrapped firmly round his legs. Outside, on the windswept promenade deck, John could sense, rather than see, the awesome power of the sea. The wind lashed his face with spume. It felt like the sting of a whip. The storm was so fast, wild, and ferocious. A steward eased baby John out of Gail's arms and helped her to half crawl, half walk through the mass of struggling bodies. She turned as John called, "Here, take Carrie and Samantha." He thrust the children towards her. A lifeboat was already dangling over the side, swinging wildly above the seething waves. Lorraine Betts, together with the guitarist Moss Hills and his musician friend Julian Butler, were forming the passengers into a straggling, staggering queue. They forgot about saving their lives. They wanted to do their duty first. Captain Evans was there, shepherding his wife and daughter into the lifeboat. He turned. "Lorraine, I must get help," he shouted, and then started to scramble into the tiny, already overcrowded boat. An arm reached out for his life jacket and pulled him roughly back to the deck. Baby John, then Carrie and Samantha were lifted into the lifeboat. Gail prepared to say goodbye to them, perhaps forever. Please, God, look after them, she silently prayed. Lorraine slapped her on the shoulder. Gail looked around. Go, ordered Lorraine with a suck of relief. Gail jumped into the boat to join her children. So the rule is women and children first. Lower away, Lorraine shouted. The boat fell into the night, lurching and crashing against the side of the ship before hitting the water with a spine-shattering thump. Mothers and children were tossed like rag dolls from their seats. Looking over the side from the promenade deck, Lorraine watched the boat swoop and corkscrew on the giant black waves. She heard the engine fire, crest a wave, and disappear into the blackness. In the distance, plunging through the mountainous seas, she could see the lights of approaching ships. Rescue teams all along the coast, alerted by the Rescue Coordination Center in Cape Town, had swung into action. In the lounge of the Oceanos, a crowd of young men was singing rugby songs. La 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 la. So calm down. A solitary woman was crying, I can't swear, she sobbed. Moss and Tracy Hill grabbed their guitars and jumped onto the stage. Soon everybody was singing. Wow, what courage, what presence of mind, what discipline. Someone tapped John Adamson on the shoulder. We need strong men to row the next lifeboat, said a voice in his ear. He crawled out of the lounge, no longer able to stand upright on the sloping rolling deck, to where Lorraine Betts half pushed him onto the waiting lifeboat. Looking back, he saw Captain Avranus struggling to reach the lifeboat and someone pulling him away. Mind it, he's the captain. Do you think he's acting like the leader? The captain who should be responsible for each and every life. All he can think of is jumping into the lifeboat. Isn't that sad? Slowly, painfully slowly, the passengers were shepherded in groups from the lounge to their lifeboat stations. Patiently, Lorraine Betts and Robin Boltman filled the boats before watching them slip away into the darkness. There were 8 lifeboats on the Oceanos, enough for everybody on board, but only 5 had been got away. Help me count how many passengers are still in the lounge, Lorraine told her staff. They found that there were still more than 250 people on board. In the dining room, just 2 decks down from the lounge, chairs were already floating as the sea began to sweep through the Oceanos. Move everybody up to the upper deck, she ordered. When the ship starts to down, we'll line up at the rails and jump into the sea. Meantime, someone must go up onto the bridge to keep a watch. Wow, what a brave woman with such great willpower and spirit and discipline. Wow. It was 3 a.m. when the remaining passengers began to inch their way out of the lounge onto the open deck, clinging to each other for support, bruising themselves as the ship rolled and they were flung against the bulkheads. When the rescue helicopter pilot Chas Goatley flew over the Oceanos, you can see the rescue helicopter flying over the Oceanos. The ship's vast white hull was already wallowing ponderously, her rails awash, her stern beginning to lift clear of the water, her bow's nose diving into the sea. Hundreds of people, all in orange life jackets, were lining the steeply heeling deck. Whoa! The helicopter hovered over the vessel, carrying 2 Navy divers harnessed to a wire from the belly of the chopper. One, Paul Wiley, was dropped onto the stern and the other, Gary Schooler, was lowered into the bows. The passengers began to cheer. Moss Hill slithered down the steeply sloping deck to greet Diver Schuyler. "I'm the ship's guitarist," he said. "You can help me put people in the harness," said Schuyler. "Where's the crew?" Moss grimaced. "Gone in the boats." "Nice one," said Schuyler bitterly. In the stern act section, Wiley shouted at a queue of passengers waiting to be rescued. "We'll hoist 2 people at a time," he could only just be heard over the constant howl of the wind and the clatter of the helicopter rotor blades. "Okay, who's first?" Captain Everness thrust his way past a line of young women, ignoring the tears running down their cheeks. He quickly buckled himself into one of the harnesses. Wiley gave the badges of rank on his shoulders a long, hard stare, then shrugged and let him go. The line jerked and the captain became the first person to be airlifted off the sinking deck of the Oceanus, open-mouthed passengers staring up at him in disbelief. Even I'm in disbelief. Imagine. When the empty wire was returned from the chopper to the deck, the ship's radio officer was the next to force his way to the front of the queue, followed by the ship's purser and a deck hand. Wiley hadn't time to argue with them. Oh my God. 7 people were carried on the first helicopter: the captain, 2 officers, a sailor, and 3 women. 243 people were still left on board. One by one, with dawn breaking and the Oceanus all the time settling lower and lower into the water, it's drowning. The liner's passengers were winched to safety. But in the forward part of the ship, naval diver Gary Schuyler detected a gradual but dramatic change in the way the vessel was lying in the water. He realized some way had to be found to speed up the evacuation. He had spotted some tiny motor launches used by passengers to potter around the smooth waters of the harbour stopovers. Stacked in the bow, he slithered down the steepening slope of the deck towards the very front of the ship. Waves were crashing over the bows and loose oil drums were rolling across the deck. Then, as if by magic, a Filipino crewman mysteriously appeared at Schuyler's side. Together, they manhandled a launch into the sea. Schuyler dived after it and hauled himself on board. The engine started first time. He yelled to Lorraine Betts and Julian Butler at the rail of the liner, "Bring people!" One by one, passengers flung themselves into the sea and swam to the launch. A non-swimmer hesitated at the rail of the ship. Butler grabbed his life jacket and dragged the man overboard with him. Schuyler and Butler made 6 trips from the Oceanus to ships, lifeboats standing off from rescuing vessels. They saved about 40 people. On the final trip, Schuyler shouted to Lorraine, "Come on." "Wait," she shelled back. Making her way to the bridge, she counted the heads of the passengers still awaiting rescue. There were only a few waiting patiently at the stern airlift point. "Moss," she called, "I've been ordered off." Moss Hill gave a weary wave. Lorraine jumped into the sea. "That's the brave lady who saved everybody's life." When she clawed her way over the side into the launch, her watch had stopped at 10:20 a.m. So the whole night through dawn, and it's morning now. From the window of the radio dome on the bridge, Robin Boatman gave a thumbs up to Moss Hill. Moss was helping his wife. Tracy pushed people up the deck to the airlift point where 2 passengers, Pete Niemand and his grown-up son Peter, had taken over at the stern section harness. "Let go of the rails and raise your arms," Pete told people as they slipped the harness under their armpits and drew the buckles tight. Then he and his son gave a thumbs. "Go!" When only a handful of people were left on the stern, Pete urged his son to be winched to safety. The young man refused to leave. Pete reached down and gently helped an elderly woman who had somehow been overlooked to her feet. She could barely stand. "Son, take this lady up with you as a favor to me." It was a request Peter couldn't refuse his father. "Hold me as tight as you can," he smiled at the shivering woman. She wrapped her thin arms around him. Pete craned his neck so that he could watch his son and the frail burden clutched to him being winched to the safety of the helicopter. Eventually, only Niemand, Wiley, Moss, Tracy, and the mysterious Filipino seaman were left on the deck. The unidentified seaman, the only member of the liner's crew to stay with the ship until the end. "Yeah, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me." These lines are from Psalm 23. Looking down from the bridge, Robin Boltman signed off over the radio. "Oceanus is about to go down. I'm leaving the bridge." He waved a salute to down at Gary Scowler and Julian Butler, who was standing off in the launch watching the ship go through her final death throes. The naval driver Wiley and passenger Niemand were the last to be winched off the ship to a hovering helicopter. Wow, each one was saved. The Oceanus toppled over and took her final plunge to the grave at 1:46 p.m. August the 4th, 1991. Every one of the 571 people on board was saved. Yay! This was the miracle of the Oceanus. Lorraine Betts, Moss, and Tracy Hill, Julian Butler, Robin Boltman, and Pete Niemand were awarded the Walrod Medal, South Africa's highest award for civilian valor. Helicopter pilot Chas Goatley and naval divers Gary Scowler, Paul Wiley were decorated by the South African Defence Force. The Greek Maritime Board found Captain Giannis Evrenas and 5 senior officers guilty of negligence and of abandoning their passengers. Wow, what an amazing story, wasn't it? So this miracle of Oceanus, imagine when good intent, courage, right values, discipline, willpower, self-discipline is there, so much can be achieved. Instead of rushing and panicking, they organized, judged what could be done, and then they got help. I hope it reminded me of Titanic. I'm sure you've all read or watched the movie, isn't it? But sadly, so many people died in Titanic. So this was an amazing story, wasn't it? Very inspiring and very motivating. I hope you young gentlemen and young ladies, you enjoyed it. I loved it. Do give me your suggestions and ideas. I'll be waiting for them. Lovely to see you as always. Bye-bye.